The Science of PMF Therapy Explained and Debunking the Large Coil Scam. In our previous video, we explained the science behind magnetic induction in PMF therapy, demonstrating it with our 5-therapy math. If you haven't watched that video, you should certainly watch it later. But in this video, I'm going to explain the math behind magnetic induction and also debunk the scam that large PMF coils have greater magnetic flux and magnetic induction through a combination of a little math and some demonstrations of this as well. So if you want a great understanding of the science behind PMF therapy, or have heard this marketing scam of a larger coils, you're certainly going to want to watch this video until the very end. So to understand the math behind this, there's just two formulas we need to know. First, the one for magnetic induction, and second, the one for magnetic flux, since magnetic flux is a component for magnetic induction. So you're not going to know your magnetic induction unless you know your magnetic flux. So magnetic induction is our electromagnetic force, our voltage, is equal to the negative number of turns in our secondary coil multiplied by the change in magnetic flux divided by the change in time. So what is magnetic flux? Magnetic flux is basically the strength of our magnetic field, which we're typically measuring in Gauss or maybe Teslas, multiplied by the area. And if that area is when it's perpendicular to a magnetic field, and if it's on an angle, we would also have to look at the cosine of that angle. So in this very simple example here, these red lines are showing a magnetic force going in this direction. And this is an arbitrary area it's passing through. So if we multiplied this area by the strength of this magnetic field going through, we would have our magnetic flux. So when looking at a PMF mat, you would either want to be looking at the area of the person lying on the mat or the entire area of the mat itself. So if you're looking at two relatively similarly sized full body PMF mats, the only different variable for magnetic flux is going to be Gauss, which means that if we have a higher Gauss, we're going to have a greater magnetic flux because in both examples, the area is the same. Also, just to understand this a little bit more, the magnetic field is not always even in all ways. It's going to be a little bit stronger at the center of the coil and weaken out around, which varies a little bit from your coil distribution. So basically in this example here, this is kind of demonstrating that. These are different magnetic intensities. Say, just it's a relative number, 5, 4, 3, 2. So if we wanted to calculate the magnetic, basically, flux of this red area here, we would add the whole sum of all these different intensities because they get a little bit weaker. And basically our magnetic flux for this red square here would be 39. In comparison, if we do a larger area that's larger than this red square here, but we're also capturing these weaker fields around here, all we do is we add up all the numbers in here and we'll get a magnetic flux of 53. So again, very simple. Higher Gauss is going to give greater magnetic flux. It has nothing to do with the coil size at all. Next, we need to understand magnetic induction. So basically, what you have is you have your PMF coil here, and it's emitting a magnetic field. And typically, when we do this formula, we're doing it on a secondary coil. So when we're counting the N here, the number of turns in the coil, this is always referring to the secondary coil. This has nothing to do with our PMF coil. But in a real practical example, when using a PMF mat, there actually is no secondary coil except in our tests we did in our previous video and we'll be doing again in this video. Instead of a coil there, a secondary coil, you're there instead, and you're not a coil, so there's not actually any turns to calculate in this formula. So in a way the formula doesn't work, but let's just call it 1, you're a coil, you're the 1 turn. It just turns into basically our Gauss, our electromagnetic force, our voltage, is equal to our Gauss divided by our change in time, which ends up being a combination of frequency, pulse duration, and waveform. I hope this wasn't too complicated to understand, but as you can see, basically, the size of the coil has nothing to do with magnetic induction or magnetic flux. So if you're hearing this common marketing scam about larger coils being better, this is a good sign to stay away from that PMF device, since if their best marketing pitch is a scam, there's probably not a lot of substance to that PMF device at all. Unlike our multi-wave 5-therapy mat, which is designed around the true science of PMF therapy and magnetic induction. Now, let's get into the testing. So to start off our testing, we're going to be testing a classic 5-therapy mat. So this one here is only a 32 by 20, but they come in all sorts of sizes, and it's only $4.99 US. So basically, rather than using the voltmeter, which we were previously using, we're going to use the oscilloscope, since we'll be able to see the waveform, and we're also going to see the voltage for one individual spike. So this is a little bit different from the voltmeter, which is kind of more measuring the cumulative voltage. And if you think about that, that's really the effect that's happening on the body. So we're going to do that afterwards as well. But this is going to give us basically a good idea of even what one individual spike, the magnetic induction, is occurring. And our other mat here, this is one of these mats, which you may or may not know already which one it is, but it has the alleged very large coils and also has a sawtooth pattern. Both these things, the marketers claim, give higher magnetic induction, but through this test, we'll basically be proving that wrong. So we have our magnetic sensor here, we have our oscilloscope set up, and let's basically turn on our controller, turn on the PEMF. We're at 15 hertz here, and you can see that this is already creating over 2 volts of magnetic induction. The scale here is 2 volts total, so it's 2 volts of the little grid up to the top there. So you have just about 1 volt going up, and then this is about 1.2 volts going down. So there's a big rise and a big fall. So we're getting pretty good magnetic induction, and this is with a basic sine wave as well. So now to test the second mat here. So we're basically at the same scale of 2 volts here. So every one of these little squares going up is 500 millivolts, and I've put this on its max intensity. So you can see we can run the program, and you are getting some magnetic induction, but you can see the voltage is only about 1.3 volts. As you can see, there's a little clusters passing by. And on the upside, you're getting maybe up to 500 millivolts at max. And on the downside, it's getting, about 0.8, which is why we're arriving to about 1.3. So you can see, even though this has very big coils, the sawtooth wave and everything there, it's actually getting much lower magnetic induction than our healthy wave classic 5 therapy mat with a simple sine wave. So for our next test, we have our voltmeter, which we used in our original video with our small little coil. So this is going to give us a little bit of different perspective of things, and also show when we switch the coil compared to the magnetic probe we're using before, which had a lot of turns in it, it's going to change our voltage. Again, basically showing that the turns in the coil is the secondary coil and has nothing to do with the coil in the mat. And this is also going to show us kind of more idea of the average voltage, because if you think about it, it's kind of like a light bulb. If you were to apply one little pulse, one little jolt of magnetic induction voltage to this light bulb, it would flicker on and flicker off. But if you increase the frequency with more repetition, the light bulb would start staying on until we got a high enough frequency where it's consistently staying on and not going off at all. So let's start the testing here. So we're going to turn on our other mat here with the highest intensity, and you can see we are getting a little bit of magnetic induction. But even though this has big coils, it's not really actually creating a lot on this little coil here. You can see we can move it around, move it around, move it around. And if we get on a hot spot that's right here, we do get a little bit of a higher reading. But overall, it's not very high at all, this mat. So bigger coils are not producing a high magnetic induction, because now that we basically have a coil with less turns, we're getting lower magnetic induction overall. Now let's compare this to the healthy wave 5 therapy classic mat. So we'll move our coil over. We're going to turn it on, and let's actually go down to 15 hertz to start. And you can see right now we're right over a coil, so we're getting a very high reading. But we can move this kind of anywhere around the mat, and we're still going to get decent readings all throughout. So you can see we move it around. It's all bouncing around, but overall it's giving us a lot higher magnetic conduction because we have the combination of basically a higher frequency, and our individual pulses also have a higher magnetic conduction as well. So now I'm going to show this concept a little bit of how actually frequency affects it. So we're at that spot here, we're at a constant of about 28.2 millivolts. And basically, as we increase our frequency, we should get a higher average overall voltage, because every time we increase our frequency by 1, we have 1 more pulse per second. So we're at 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25, 26, 27, 28, 29, and 30. And you can see all throughout that, the millivolts gradually was going up. As we add more pulses, we're getting more average voltage over time. So these are just two ways to look at basically magnetic induction. We can look at an individual pulse and what the magnetic induction is, or we can kind of look at this more average over time. Regardless how we look at it, with the healthy wave 5 therapy classic mat here, we were getting much higher magnetic induction than the large coil sawtooth mat here. And that is the science behind magnetic induction and magnetic flux when it comes to PMF mats. Now, if you want more information on these different formulas to fully understand the concepts a little bit more, I'll provide some resources in the description below. Otherwise, if you want to learn more about PMF therapy or PMF devices, make sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel to watch more of our videos and visit us at healthywavemat.com. And remember, don't fall for the big coil scam. It doesn't matter how your coils are designed. All that matters is the magnetic field they produce.